Welcome to the Great Military Philosophers on Afghanistan. My name's John LeMay, and in this portion of the series, I examine my experiences in the war in Afghanistan through the lens of Sun Tzu's book, The Art of War.
Sun Tzu on assessments. Therefore, to gauge the outcome of war, we must appraise the situation on the basis of the following 5 criteria and compare the two sides by assessing their relative strengths. So the 5 criteria are the way, which talks about the alignment of the people to their leadership, and also talks about the willingness to die. Climate, weather, light, the seasons, terrain, lay of the land, distances. Command, the qualities in the commander of wisdom, integrity, humanity, courage, discipline. And regulation, organizational effectiveness, logistics, the chain of command. So these are Sun Tzu's 5 criteria to assess 2 opposing forces. And it strikes me as very similar to U.S. Army doctrine. So now that we've looked at this, let's take a brief look at some U.S. Army doctrine. So U.S. Army doctrine, the military decision-making process, step 9. And immediately, some of you who are familiar with this may say, hey, but John, there's only 7 steps. Well, you're right. This would be step 2, mission analysis, sub-step 2, intelligence preparation of the battlefield, sub-step 2, describe battlefield effects. However, having gone through all the sub-steps and sub-steps many times, they all felt like steps to me. Now that I'm retired, I'm just going to call it step 9. Okay, so that's terrain and weather. And it is, of course, very similar to climate and terrain that Sun Tzu talked about. But even more similar is step 26, analyze relative combat power. So in this, U.S. Army doctrine, the military decision-making process says, hey, assess the ratio of forces, compare force ratios between the 2 opposing sides. It's more a mathematical assessment. And then do a more subjective assessment of each side's strengths and weaknesses based on the elements of combat power, which for the U.S. Army are intelligence, movement and maneuver, fires, sustainment, protection, mission command. Those are the warfighting functions, plus information and leadership. So here they are. And these strike me as very similar categories to what Sun Tzu suggested. There's a lot of overlap there. And the methodology is very similar. So as I read Sun Tzu, I immediately thought, hey, I've seen this before. I've seen it in Army doctrine. And either Army doctrine was inspired by it, or as a sort of affirmation, it was developed in parallel many centuries later through the Army's experience in war. Okay, so we talked a little bit about U.S. Army doctrine. Now let's go back to Sun Tzu's framework and apply Sun Tzu's framework to the war in Afghanistan.